In the town of Wind Whisper, the fog never truly lifted. It hung heavy over the cobblestone streets and wept moisture into the gnarled timbers of the old seafront houses. It caressed the shores with ghostly fingers and whispered through the mooring ropes of the bobbing boats like restless spirits. This town, cloaked in perpetual gray, clung to the edge of the world as if hiding from the prying eyes of the sun. Mara, with her sketchbook clutched like a shield to her chest, arrived on the eve of the Sea Spirits Festival, her steps quiet against the mist-dampened stones. She was drawn by a calling that she couldn't articulate, a thread of melody that hummed in her dreams, pulling her to Wind Whisper, a name as eerie as the tales that festooned its history. As she wandered through the narrow lanes, Mara felt the weight of eyes upon her, the glances of townsfolk who moved like shadows against the fog, their features blurred, as if they too were part of some unfinished sketch. There was an unsettling beauty in the town's eerie calm, in the silent expectation that hung as palpably as the fog. That night, standing on the time-worn pier, Mara watched the sea thrash beneath the hoary light of a struggling moon. The festival had begun, a peculiar ceremony of songs and silent prayers, and the air was ripe with the scent of salt and old, forgotten things. From the heart of this quiet pandemonium, a melody rose, a haunting sea shanty that spoke of a phantom ship, the Mistral, lost to these waters, a spectral vessel that returned for forgotten souls. The song seeped into Mara, cold and sharp as the sea spray. Tonight it promised the ship would appear, and deep within, where her nightmares stirred, Mara felt the truth of it. She knew, with a sudden, bone-deep certainty, that tonight she would see the ghost ship. Not through the sketches of her dreams, but here, at the edge of the sea where the real and the surreal danced in the moonlight. The festival blurred around her, a specter of movements and murmured lore, as Mara stood alone, fixed to the spot, staring out at the stirring dark waters, waiting for the Mistral to emerge from the fog, as inevitable as fate. As the last echoes of the sea shanty faded into the night, the crowd began to disperse, each individual shadow merging with the mist, until Mara stood alone on the pier. The festival's eerie chorus was replaced by the rhythmic lapping of waves against wood, a natural cadence that seemed to beckon her closer to the water's edge. Mara's eyes remained locked on the horizon where the sea met the sky in an indistinguishable line of darkness. The moon, shrouded by a passing cloud, cast a pallid light that shimmered on the surface of the water, creating illusions of movement where there was none. Then, as if summoned by the song or perhaps by her own fervent expectations, a shape began to form in the mist, a vague outline at first but steadily gaining substance. The ship appeared spectral, its form shimmering with a ghostly luminescence. The sails were tattered, fluttering like the wings of a giant bird, and the hull bore the scars of countless storms and battles with the sea. It moved silently, unnaturally, as if it floated on the mist rather than the water. Mara's breath caught in her throat as she watched the ghost ship glide closer, its presence both mesmerizing and terrifying. It was exactly as her dreams had painted it, ethereal and ominous, a vessel carrying with it the weight of untold stories and lost souls. Her fingers tightened around her sketchbook, the urge to capture this moment overwhelming her initial fear. Compelled by a force she could neither understand nor resist, Mara reached for her charcoal pencil and began to sketch furiously. The lines flowed from her hand with a life of their own, tracing the haunting beauty of the Mistral as it approached the pier. She could feel the cold dampness of the fog seeping into her bones, the chill accentuated by the eerie silence that enveloped the ship. As the Mistral drew nearer, a sudden gust of wind stirred the fog, and for a moment the ship seemed to vanish, swallowed by the night. Mara's heart raced, her eyes searching the darkness. Then, as quickly as it had disappeared, The ship re-emerged, now startlingly close, close enough that Mara could see the rotted wood of its railing, the empty sockets of its figurehead's eyes. Frozen in place, Mara felt a chill deeper than the cold night air, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. She slowly lifted her gaze from her sketchbook to the ship's deck. There, amidst the shadows, figures began to materialize. They stood motionless, a crew of specters, their eyes hollow yet somehow piercing, fixed directly on her. Mara knew she should be terrified, should run from this ghostly apparition and never look back. But something in the eyes of those spectral sailors, something in the silent plea they seemed to make, held her fast. The world around her, the pier, the town, the festival, faded into insignificance. In that moment, there was only Mara, the Mistral, and the souls it carried, reaching across the divide between the living and the dead. Mara stood transfixed as the specters on the deck of the Mistral began to move with slow, deliberate grace. Their motions were fluid, like a dance choreographed by the wind itself. As she watched, the air around her thickened, and the mist swirled into tendrils that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Each breath she took filled her with the cold, damp sadness of the sea. The world around Mara dimmed further, drawing her into a trance-like state. Her surroundings, the wooden pier, the lapping waves, the distant lights of the town, faded into a canvas of black. In this void, vivid and haunting visions manifested, revealing glimpses into the Mistral's tragic past. She saw the ship in its prime, sails full against a bright blue sky, the deck alive with bustling crewmen. But quickly, the scene turned grim as storm clouds gathered, and monstrous waves besieged the ship. Amidst this chaos, the figure of the captain emerged on deck, clutching a locket tightly, his face a mask of despair and determination. Time then skipped forward, showing the ship listless and battered, abandoned to the fog, its sails tattered, forever lost in a liminal space between the sea and the sky. Through these visions, Mara felt the despair and endless wandering of the ship and its crew, souls bound to the Mistral, their salvation tied to the fulfillment of their unresolved earthly ties. Each soul revealed its pain. A young sailor longing for his beloved, an old deckhand yearning for forgiveness from his estranged son, and the captain, haunted by a message of love never delivered. These were souls not merely lost, but searching, their redemption intertwined with the ship's cursed voyage. Mara understood that the Mistral was more than a ghost ship. It was a vessel of redemption, collecting souls needed to break its curse. As the visions faded and Mara was once again on the pier, the spectral crew continued to watch her, their hollow eyes filled with a silent plea. The air grew colder, the mist thicker, and a profound sorrow enveloped her. It was a sorrow not just observed but deeply felt, resonating with her own unspoken losses and regrets. Compelled beyond reason, Mara stepped off the pier, her movements automatic, as if drawn by an invisible string. The cold sea enveloped her, shockingly icy, but she pushed forward, swimming toward the ghostly silhouette of the Mistral. Her mind was a whirl of emotions, a mix of fear, determination, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. As she swam, the lights of the town and the sounds of the waves faded into a profound silence. The ship loomed larger, its damaged hull and torn sails becoming clearer. Mara's strokes grew heavier, her energy waning as the cold seeped deeper into her bones. Her vision began to blur, edges darkening, until all she could see was the ghost ship ahead, a beacon in the consuming blackness. Just as her strength was about to give out, the world turned utterly black, and Mara felt herself being lifted from the sea, the spectral hands of the Mistral's crew pulling her aboard, welcoming her into their fold, bridging the gap between the living and the lost. Mara's eyes fluttered open to a dimly lit room, the air thick with the scent of salt and old wood. She lay on a coarse, damp blanket that covered a narrow bed built into the wall of the cabin. The walls themselves were adorned with maps that had yellowed with age, and instruments whose purpose was long forgotten. As her eyes adjusted to the subdued lighting, she realized she was in the captain's quarters of the Mistral. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. The captain, his visage as spectral as his crew, yet carrying an aura of solemn authority. His coat was tattered at the edges, and his beard was like sea foam, white and wispy. He regarded Mara with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the ocean itself. "You're awake?" he said, his voice a raspy echo of a life spent shouting over the roar of the sea. "I apologize for the abruptness of your arrival, but the ship chooses who it reveals itself to and how." Mara sat up, her body heavy, her mind racing to piece together the fragmented visions and the reality she now faced. "The ship, it's real then? Not just a legend?" "Real enough," the captain replied, pulling up a wooden chair beside the bed. "But more than wood and sail, this ship is a manifestation of collective guilt and unresolved grief. It sails not on ocean currents, but on the regrets and unfulfilled duties of those it carries." Mara absorbed his words, her thoughts drifting to the visions she had seen. The spectral crew, their eyes filled with sorrow and longing. Why does it appear? Why collect souls? The captain's gaze drifted towards a small porthole, through which the ghostly light of the moon shone. Each soul aboard has left something unresolved, a tether that keeps them bound to the mortal world. The Mistral offers a chance for redemption, a final voyage to mend what was broken. But the curse of the ship, its eternal damnation, can only be lifted when one soul willingly sacrifices itself for the others, to take on their collective grief and free them all. Mara felt a chill run down her spine as the magnitude of the captain's words truly hit her. She looked around at the shadowed corners of the cabin, half expecting to see the crew lurking there, listening, hoping. The weight of their gazes, unseen but palpable, pressed upon her. "Why show me this? Why tell me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because you, Mara, have seen the depths of our plight and have not turned away. You carry your own grief, your own unresolved threads that resonate with the Mistral's crew," the captain said, turning his piercing gaze back to her. "Only someone who understands loss and regret can end our torment, and perhaps in doing so, find a way to resolve their own." Mara's mind raced as she contemplated her own life, the fragments of past regrets, the unresolved goodbyes, and the things left unsaid. Was she indeed the one the ship had been waiting for? Could she find it within herself to become the sacrifice that would end centuries of wandering? The choice lay before her, stark and daunting. To leave the ship was to return to a life haunted by what she now knew, by the ghosts of her past and those of the Mistral. To stay and accept the captain's offer was to embrace an unknown fate, potentially liberating not only the souls aboard, but perhaps her own. As the ship creaked and groaned around her, seeming to sway with the swell of the sea, Mara felt the pull of destiny, the call of the deep, urging her to decide the path of her own story and those of the souls entwined with the Mistral. As days melted into nights, each wrapped in the ceaseless fog that clung to Wind Whisper, the town whispered its secrets only to those attuned to listen. Mara, once a visitor bound by curiosity and haunted by visions, became a whisper herself, an echo in the mist, her fate woven into the fabric of the town's lore. Her physical presence had faded from the pier where she had once stood, but her essence lingered, a tale half told that fluttered on the tongues of the townsfolk. In Wind Whisper, life ebbed and flowed like the tide, pulling in new mysteries as it washed away the old. It was on such a tide that Leo arrived, a young painter with a restless gaze that seemed to pierce the veil between seen and unseen. Drawn by dreams he barely understood, visions of a ghostly ship enveloped by the sea's eternal embrace, Leo found himself walking the mist-soaked streets of Windwhisper, each step drawing him deeper into the enigma. His days were spent wandering the coastline, his nights consumed by vivid dreams of the Mistral, its sails billowing against a backdrop of stars and shadow. The locals, ever guarded yet oddly forthcoming, shared fragments of the ship's tragic saga, their stories painting a picture of a vessel not merely lost to the sea, but bound to it by something deeper, something eternal. Leo, much like Mara before him, was captivated by the allure of the Mistral. The pier where the townsfolk last remembered seeing Mara called to him, a silent sentinel in the fog. There he waited as the festival approached, the same eerie calm settling over the town, the same whispered shanties floating in the air.
A sailor's heart and captain's light in the moon's pale watch and the stars' soft light. One more soul to ease the storm till the Mistral needs sail no more. Oh, hear the whisper, watch the sea, the Mistral's tale forever be in whispers while she's ever near. The ghost ships call forever.